So here we have a photo that we're going to use this for our distant mountain. Now we're going back into the channels again, just how we did with the clouds. We're going to find a channel with the most contrast. Here it's the blue channel. We're going to duplicate that channel, go into curves again, and you notice how we can use the color pickers to pick our white and black point. It's very useful for getting a nice high contrast matte. So now we have this black and white image. We inverse that, Command I. Now we're going into filter noise, dust and scratches, clean up all those little dots. It's a really handy little filter for doing that. So we're going to just take it up a couple pixels. I think we like it at 2. Now we just make a selection of that. Go back to our original, do a copy and paste. So now we have that isolated. I'm just going to do a marquee and just select the mountains. Now we're going to copy that. Go back to our PSD. And paste that in on top of the island layer. And that actually matches pretty perfectly. I'm just going to scale it down. And at this point we are really concerned about just matching scale, matching color. And we're just going to do a little bit of squashing and stretching, but keep it pretty minimal. So I went into the despeckle filter, try and get rid of some of that noise. We don't want to overdo it, so we're going to go back to that dust and scratches. We're going to do that, and then we pull up the fade again. So we just did a 1 pixel dust and scratches. Pull up the fade to a little over 50%, just to back it off just a little bit. Go to that defringe just to get rid of that pixel border that happens when you make those high contrast mattes. And we're just using the marquee tool just to squash some of that water in there, because we do want to retain that water, because that's good information. It's something good for us to key off of. But we just wanted to compress it vertically a little bit, just to apply a bit more distance. So we've added a layer mask. And now we're just, big soft brush, just scribbling out the areas we don't want to see. And the reason we use a layer mask is so that we, if we want the rest of that image, we can then paint into layer mask and see it. You know, I like to try and use non-destructive editing. So here we're basically in the same process again. We're going to find another nice chunk of mountain, some reference that I shot down in New Zealand. And so here we're going to do the exact same thing. Do a nice high contrast copy of the blue channel. Just pull a nice matte. Go into the dust and scratches. Just get rid of a lot of the big or a lot of the small little grain and dots. We just quickly use the lasso tool to clean up all that junk on the inside. But then we made a selection. Now we just copy and paste that right into our PSD. Shrink that way down. That's going to become the basis for this mountain on the right. Okay. Now we're just going to try and get that to roughly match our sketch. This is a very nice piece of reference because it has that nice breakup of vegetation and rock. So we're going to be using a lot of this type of reference, but we do want more of a vertical type of mountain. So you can see it's why I'm using the free transform tool with the distort option to really yank that around. So we're going to use the defringe again. You can see how it just magically made that nice little glow around the element disappear. So now we are erasing a little bit. We're using an eraser with some of the scatter settings turned on and some of the shape dynamics, so we get a bit more of a random edge. Now we do have a lot of correction to do on this one. So calling up curves, and we're just going to warm it up a little bit using the quick mask gradient to darken the top of this, because in my photo this was much larger, and the top was heavily being influenced by the atmosphere and by the light from the sky. So we're going to try and counteract that to make this work for more of a distant hill and mountain. So we're just doing some corrections and curves, adding a bit of warmth just to help this sit in with our sketch. And now what we're doing is we accidentally called up a vector mask, which we did not want to do. But we're going to go into our layer effects and pull up color overlay. I use this quite a bit. You'll get sick of seeing it. What this does, this overlays a color over your layer, and that you can then dial in the opacity. So it's a great way of adding haze without having to color correct and kill all your nice contrast and detail in your original layer. And then it's also something that you can continue to edit and refine. As you can see here, I'm going back into it, going to warm it up a little bit, pull it in a little bit more into the green range, but I'm still keeping it pretty desaturated. It's starting to look pretty good. We're going to be messing with this quite a bit. Now I'm going back to our distant island layer. And we still have all this grain in here. So we're gonna try and figure out a way to clean that up a little bit. So we're going back to one of the smaller little chalk brushes, and we're going to create a new layer, and we're going to use the previous layer as a clipping mask. And so what that means is, as we paint in this layer, will only affect the layer that is immediately under it. So what we're doing, we're just sampling right off it, and we're just painting in, especially in the shadow areas where it's larger solid tone. We're just painting in with a bit more of a flat color, just to get rid of some of that grain, or actually digital noise is what it is. Also, just gonna add a bit of highlights, just to shape the mountain, just to make it work for our composition. Remember, photo references are just that. They're just reference. We're gonna change them to make them work for us. That's the main reason we did that sketch. Is if we had found photos that we liked early on, then we would have become a slave to those photos. But you really want the photos to work for you. So that's why you always figure out your color and your composition first. Adding a bit of haze to the left of that layer, just so that it looks like it's not perfectly perpendicular to us, but it is receding in space. So now we're going back to our mountain layer on the right, just playing with that color overlay a little bit, just trying to dial in the right amount. And what we've done the exact same thing, and we've added another mountain here on the right, just using the exact same techniques. And now we're calling up a new layer. We're painting in a bit more rock, just because this particular piece of reference did not have the amount of rock that I really wanted, just because I really want it to be consistent and to match our sketch. So we're just going in with this little chalk brush, just blocking in some basic colors. We're sampling right off of our reference layer. You see, I'm turning on scattering and shape dynamics. The scattering does just that. It scatters the brush in a random way, and the shape dynamics, I have it set to angle jitter, which means that the brush rotates randomly, and also varies size randomly. So just by painting a line, you can get a lot of nice random little marks, which is great when you are mimicking this sort of rock and vegetation. So now we're turning that back off, and we're going to go and put in a few more bright highlights. Now this is why I like to work at 4K, because I can really get in here and scribble in all these details, and then when you go out to film and sample it down to 2K, then all that detail compresses really nicely, and it's really hard to tell what's painted and what's photo. So on that same layer, I'm starting to block in a bit more of a beach. Our reference just of the side of the cliff just went straight into the water, but here, because I do want this tropical sort of landscape, I definitely do want a beach in there. So now we're adding a bit more of a brighter cyan right along the shoreline where the water gets shallower. And in order to make those horizontal lines, again, we are holding down the shift key as we are painting horizontally, and that'll keep our lines nice and straight. So I'm going to put in a beach on that distant mountain as well. You can see I'm just adding little bits where like sand is collecting up into the cracks, and it really helps give it form and makes it believable, as if this mountain really is coming down and going into this beach. Just scribbling in just a bit more of water detail and water lines. Now we're just erasing out some of the slop of those two mountain layers. It's where we don't need to see it. We will deal with reflections later. Right now we're just trying to get the water's edge and the mountains to work nicely. Go back to our paint layer. Just adding a bit of color variation and value variation just to imply different depths, different details in the water. So now what we've done, we have duplicated our distant mountain layer, and we're going to make a higher contrast version of it, and that is also warmer, and we're just trying to isolate the highlights because essentially what we are doing, we are creating a separate highlight pass. So we did a nice warm layer, and then we're going to put that layer on the screen mode so that only the highlights come through, and in that layer mask, we can then go in and paint in our shadows. So now we have 2 layers, 1 highlight, 1 shadow tone, so that we have a lot of control over our color and over our shadow. So then we can then go paint into these layer masks to tell where we want light. So this is essentially how you relight a photograph. You do one version of the layer as a shadow, and then you duplicate that, make it high contrast, and then screen that on to make a highlight pass. So you can see there's our shadow. Then we just added our highlight layer back on. So now we can dial in the amount. It's very similar to 3D render where you do a multi-pass rendering. We're just creating that right in 2D using photos. So instead of going in and painting in highlights and shadows, we're actually using the photo itself to create the highlights. So now we've done a little bit of time lapse here, and we've shown how we blocked in a little bit more of this middle hill, and right now we're just adding in a element for the lit side. And so the main purpose here is to show you how you can sort of bridge the 2 gaps. On the right side we have very muted shadow tones, but on the left we definitely want it lit. So we're going to go in and in the layer mask we're using a just another standard Photoshop brush with the scattering and shape dynamics turned on, so that as we paint we get sort of a nice random organic edge. And so we're just going to try and figure out how to show this transition of light to dark, because we were sort of fortunate on the other side, it just was all sort of flatly lit, but here we have to show how the light turns. So right now I'm just painting into the layer mask, just kind of trying to figure out how these forms move around. And we don't want it to be a perfectly straight line, so that's why I'm kind of going in and out of that line. Just a quick little defringe on that. All right, so and you notice I'll keep clicking these layers on and off to kind of check ourselves against our sketch. Now we've called up a new layer. Now this is going to be a paint layer, and we're just going to leave that alone as we clone down some of this detail. But going back to our paint layer, we're going to go, notice we clicked on the color dynamics. Now, in addition to the shape dynamics, what these color dynamics do is they give us hue jitter, saturation jitter, and brightness jitter, which is extremely helpful for mimicking this type of vegetation, because there is a lot of subtle color variation. So as we paint, each little dot is a slightly different color and value. And we're going back to that sort of smallish chalky brush that we can, and sampling right off the painting. Then we're just blocking in more rock, and then just making shapes that we think work for us. And notice we keep referring back to the sketch, and we're just letting the nature of our brush do a lot of the work for us. It's a really great way to imply a lot of detail very fast. And we're just sampling off different shadow tones, highlight tones, just to give some form to these bushes and rock. We're careful to put shadows alongside the rock to show that the bushes come out from the rock. Now we're going into a very, very tiny little brush, just kind of randomly painting in just a lot of little details. It's very hard to mimic the randomness of nature. We are conditioned to see pattern and some sort of sense of what we see. So here we are, we're going to pull another matte. This is going to be a bit more complicated because we have a lot of the bright rock. So we're going to do this in 2 parts. We're going to first pull a matte on our blue channel, and then we're going to pull a matte on our red, because we are making 2 separate mattes. We're making one for the highlights, one for the shadows. So here in our red, we are definitely isolating the top bright highlights, and then we're making a selection of that. Then going back into our blue copy, so that then we can just use basically combine channels so that we can use a matte to paint into another channel, which is what we're doing right now. So we're using that red copy channel to paint into the blue copy to make our sort of master matte. We're just using the lasso tool to get out a lot of the slop. And here we have our nice isolated mountain. We're going to just get a bit more slop out of there. We're going to inverse that, make a selection of it, and then copy and paste it right into our painting. Now this is going to be the shadow side of our big main hill. Now we're starting to speed this up a little bit because you guys are pros at this by now. And we're just trying to match the contours of the sketch. And we're just going in with the clone tool just to block in some detail. We will do a lot of painting and to clean this up, and also just a lot of this, a lot of this will be hidden by the city buildings. So we're going into the color overlay as we did before, so making a nice shadow dark tone while still keeping a lot of that detail. So again, we're going to move very quickly because we've done this before. Making a high contrast matte. Using the blue copy, copy and paste. There's going to be the majority of our highlight side. Now I like a lot of this, though I'm not entirely pleased with the sheer aspect of the part on the right, so we're going to probably add another little chunk in there, but we're going to do a quick little color correction just to get them to sit in there. And using the layer mask, we are just going to paint out the areas we don't want. Now I do like this area because it has a lot of the nice rock and vegetation, so we're going to use that as our middle piece. Just quickly using curves and quick mask gradients and saturation, just all the same stuff we've been doing just to get this to all sit in there nicely. And then we will later use paint to bridge all these together. But right now we're just trying to block in the main areas. Now I've called up a new layer and I'm painting in a lot of this little beach detail. Just kind of figure out where it is and how it sits.